Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Today it's our honor to have Professor Yi Liu from King's College. I'll briefly introduce her before I give her the time to talk about her really exciting new book. Professor Yi Liu is a senior lecturer at the Department of International Development, King's College in the UK. Okay, and well, before she wrote this book, actually she wrote extensively about the education stratification in China and how it is tied into meritocracy, yet it is also highly stratified. And she also have extensive writing about gender and family, and her recent work is printed in Gender and Society about emotional work of migrant workers in the gig industry. So today, she talks about gender and family, and this is her title. I think it's exactly the book title, right? Only Daughters, Families and Wealth Accumulation in Contemporary China. So let's welcome her.
Thank you so much for having me today, and it's such a great honor to visit NTU, and thank you for Professor Wu's invitation. And today, it's, my book will be published in November, but today I just want to kind of share some of the my research findings with you. My book is called Only Daughters, but today I'm only talk about wealth accumulation. Before I want to talk a little bit about why I started this journey of research, why Only Daughters. So it's part of after my PhD, during my PhD journey, I found, only children from only child families had a very, very interesting life journeys. And we have read the really brilliant, inspiring book by Vanessa Fong on Only Hope. So, and I found, but the story is not completed because Vanessa Fong talk about adolescents, about their education, about their aspirations. But I want to really follow up this group of young people from university to the labor force. And I couldn't, partly because of all my research participants at the time used the social media, it was dated social media applications called QQ. I don't know if you heard of that. And then they suddenly switched to WeChat, and I was absolute a dinosaur at the time. I lost all my research contacts. Then in 2015, and you probably noticed China announced the end of the one-child policy, which received massive academic and media attention. Within all this, kind of like media storm about China's demographic shift, and I felt there was a kind of a missing jigsaw, the missing voices from Only Daughters. We have seen a lot of research about missing girls, about children from a one-child generation, and a lot of publications focused on how one-child policy violated women's fertility rights and had been implemented in such a drastic fashion, which I agree. But I think it's also important to tell a complete story of Only Daughters. Those Only Daughters, I meant only girls born in one-child families without any siblings, without competition of brothers. So, and another kind of a research rationale is kind of my really humble attempt to Zhengming in Chinese, to kind of correct, in a way, the massive media portray of children born under one-child generation. So we have seen a lot of, probably you haven't seen the book covers with spoiled boys sitting on a throne, or they were called spoiled princesses, spoiled emperors, little sons. But with academic research, particularly research from psychologists, they didn't find significant cognitive kind of differences when they trace the upbringing of the only children and those with siblings. So I also want to find out whether these spoiled children or how they turn out to be adults. I want to talk a little bit about my fieldwork before I discuss the findings. So I started the pilot interviews in early 2017, and I formally launched a search for research participants on International Women's Day. I thought it was appropriate to do research on gender. So in total, so the whole fieldwork lasted from 2017 to 2019. I conducted a total final interviews included in my books, 82 individual interviews and 29 shadowing observations, where I follow all the women's care work. And in total, the study draws upon around 358 hours of fieldwork. I want to talk a little bit about my research site. I selected a 3-city design. So at the beginning, the first stage of my research, I focused on Beijing and Shanghai. There's a good reason to select Beijing and Shanghai, partly because I want to find only daughters from a wide range of geographical origin, not just from Beijing or from Shanghai. I want to find they're from different provinces, every corner of China. And Beijing, Shanghai provided such a desirable location where I could trace research participants from wide range of geographical origin. And another reason is because I had limited funding. At that time, I was a one-woman band and no research assistant. It was difficult to travel to different provinces to conduct fieldwork. And another reason is because the great scholars I admire and read whose work inspired me tend to choose Beijing and Shanghai as a case study. Wang Xiying 老师, Pei Yuxin, who wrote 70后, women from 70后, also choose Shanghai. Wang Xiying 老师 choose Beijing, and Liu Fengshu 老师 also choose Beijing to look at, intergenerational family dynamics. But during the second phase of my fieldwork, and I realized there's a lot of kind of similarities in terms of a metropolitan effect, in terms of parenting style, in terms of their aspiration for their children, in terms of work-family conflicts. So I decided to introduce a third site, Nanjing. Nanjing was a very different from Beijing and Shanghai, not as metropolitan as Beijing and Shanghai, and also had a very, very different economic transformation during China's reform and opening up. So Nanjing had a very unique kind of economic trajectory, characterized by bottom-up entrepreneurship. So the Yangtze Delta, Jiangsu, Zhejiang, Shanghai, had the satellite of small businesses which worked as an ecosystem to provide unique opportunities during the economic transition to compete with the state-owned enterprises, with the big corporations. And my great colleague, Robin Klinger-Vidra, who did a lot of research on entrepreneurs in Jiangzhe. So I choose Nanjing as a third site to allow me to look at these women's mobility patterns rather than social mobility from a small county to big city like Beijing, Shanghai. So in mainland China, social mobility is understood in very different terms. So when we talk about social mobility, you went to university and get a professional job and reach this social mobility triangle. Compared to your parental generation, you achieved a step up. But in mainland China, social mobility has been characterized by geographical mobility. If you achieved from a small county to Beijing, Shanghai, you already achieved upward social mobility. So I want to capture some of the kind of different grades of social mobility by limited geographical mobility to look at the impact of kinship on these women's life opportunities. So this is the final sample of my research participants. So majority of the women I interviewed had jobs. And the jobs, they work in the public sector, private sector, and cooperatives. And the majority of the women I interviewed also were married. The 3 divorcees and the 4 never married at the time of the interview. And majority of the women had at least bachelor degrees, so had a university degrees, went to university. And 5 of them attended vocational colleges. So if we look at the parental socioeconomic backgrounds, the parents, 53, so more than half of my interviewees are from professional families, around a third, from less than a third from working class families. But they all from, if we look at the geographical origin, so characterized by 户口, all of them had 城市户口. So, which is allied with the implementation of one-child policy. At the time, those who had agriculture 户口 were allowed to have additional child if their firstborn were a girl. So in the book, there are 7 chapters in the book. There are many themes I covered in the book. I talk about the gender meritocracy, to look at their girlhood, and particularly the experience with the Gaokao. And I also look at, after the transition to the labor market, the job opportunities, and to what extent this Gaokao experience, success or failure, help them to open the opportunities in the labor market. I also look at intergenerational relations, to look at the role of the parents in their life course transitions. So some of the parents were empowerment partners. Some of the parents transformed from empowerment partners into gaslighters. I also look at the relationship between the married couples. I ask about the one chapter I wrote about what is love in China. And for the married couple, love is, the answers to love is much more surprising. For them, love is about geographical kind of assimilation. So another way to compatible. Love is about how compatible we are. Love is rice. So one of my findings is love is rice. And also I look at the role, their kinship, their parents, their family, in terms of matchmaking. So one of the chapter I look at how women manage the Korean family, particularly with the 2-child policy and the 3-child policy, with the China's transition into a prenatal push and with more baby demands. So with this baby demand, how women respond to this kind of pressure. The last chapter of the book, I focus on Jiwa, motherhood. And in my book, I categorize women, they are either egalitarian or they're kind of a traditionalist, or they convert between the two. I categorize them in different camps about their gender attitudes, but in the final chapter, they all converge to be Jiwa mothers. So I explore why women with very different gender attitudes or practice or adapted to this very, very unique style of modern parenting. It's not just a helicopter parenting, it's not just intensive mothering, it's actually a highly competitive, highly performative types of mothering. But this lecture will focus on gender and wealth accumulation. So hopefully, if you're interested in my book, I would come back to share the rest of the findings. Why did I research the wealth position of only daughters? Partly because there is a gap. So the research across the global South, global North context has shown that women are penalized in terms of wealth accumulation through property ownership, through intergenerational transitional assets. It's been the case across many, many different contexts. And also, a lot of scholars look at the, how the structure and the institution factors, cultural norms continue to constrain women's role in wealth accumulation. And so I've been working with a group of scholars on a special issue for British Journal of Sociology. We look at the role of the families in wealth accumulation. And why researching only daughters? Because only daughters is a very, very unique cohort, very unique demographic unit compared to existing research on women's wealth position. So the only daughters have become the only heirs in many urban Chinese families. Can we assume these women have much stronger wealth positions than women from, for instance, from previous generations? Or whether these women mobilize this wealth, natal wealth, to negotiate egalitarian relationship in a marriage. So so that's why I found this particular wealth position really worth researching. But with this special issue, we need a conceptual framework to understand, to research the mainland Chinese context. So this group of scholars I work with on this special issue look at a wide range of factors. For instance, my colleague, probably you read her book, Célie Bessier and Sibyl Kolek, who wrote the really brilliant book called The Gender of the Capital. So they look at why women consistently lost out on wealth opportunities during their life course. They give a very interesting case about a bakery they researched. This is just a normal bakery in south of France, where the owners automatically pass the bakery business to their son, despite the fact their daughters have been working in the bakery for free since they were teenagers. So their labor completely eliminated in a whole family wealth accumulation. The girls did not earn salary. The girls left, got married with very little assets compared to the son. So Celine argued it's important to look at the family even as a modern unit, economic institution, how to investigate the role of the family in wealth accumulation. We should not separate, we should not just leave the kind of wealth accumulation to the market or to the states. We need to bring back research on families. And family practice, and another fascinating research on by Isabel Stam from University of Berlin, Technology University of Berlin. She proposes a concept called ownership competence, where families not only just invest in education, send their children to good schools, invest in good universities, or give legacies to their children or cash gifts, but to instill their children this competence called ownership competence, to teach them a language that you own your assets. You absolutely deserve it. So it's a kind of combination between meritocracy and the extended skill set with merit and your own, your entitlements. So ownership competence was a very important concept in family research. And so family practice is a very important in terms of persistent inequalities in wealth. And my former colleague also researched about India, where there's new legislations was introduced to eliminate, to root out this kind of very gendered inheritance law. But she found out the family had various different ways to navigate this law, still prioritize their sons in their inheritance. Instead, their daughters benefit only from investment in education. So family practice is very important for us to kind of understand the persistent gender inequality. So inspired by all this prior research, I propose, I agree with existing approach to look at institutional factor, cultural factor, but for me to research only daughters in the Chinese context, it's important to introduce a life course lens. Therefore, I reconceptualize families as sequential and interconnected sites and agents of wealth accumulation across key life course. So this particular conceptual framework helps us to kind of address existing research. So existing research only focuses on like a vertical relationship. So the inheritance, the wealth passed on between generations from grandparents, parents, and children. But I want to bring the kind of horizontal relationship to look at this children's wealth position since they were little, then education, labor market, and marriage, and midlife, and potentially old age. To combine these two types of research together. And also, by looking at the families as interconnected as sites and agents, it can also help us to understand how family do and discipline their projects. So family are not just a very passive, very like agent about wealth accumulation, and they also show off their wealth at a crucial landmark in a key life course. I will give some examples. And also, this particular framework would also help us to understand how women negotiate their own, to exercise their own agency. So the research existing research on women and wealth in China. So basically, we all know China, since the one-child policy, the Chinese family has been through massive transformation, so characterized as a 4-to-1 families. The children, of the one-child generation had a very unique wealth position, and for women in particular. Existing research look at wealth transfer, primarily focus on investments in education, focus on health, focus on the well-being, and there's some research look at women's property ownership. And it was did not specify on children from one-child policy, but they argue when the women without brothers, they're more likely to be a property owner. So that's from the China General Social Survey data. So what I would like to look at, so my research is qualitative research, only 82 women. So I do not want to generalize the finding, but I want to provide a kind of snapshot of women's wealth position. So in general, I map out the timing and the types and the source of wealth transfer these 82 only daughters received during various life course position. So the types of wealth the women receive, including money, cash, valuables, jewelries, designer bags, imported cars. I learned so many designer brands during my field work, and properties. I even learned how to, I will give you a case of a piano. I never heard of that type of piano. This wealth transfer occurred during various milestones in their life course transition. So going to university is very, very important, a milestone for these women, not just to have not just a mark of upward social mobility, to be first generation university student, but also a massive opportunity to receive wealth. 红包, red envelopes. And the second is wedding ceremonies. So the traditional, I think Sarah's book on the marriage also mentioned about the wedding ceremonies. Wedding ceremonies are very important kind of public display of family wealth. But for my research, this only daughter's family, it was the first time for women's family to invest in weddings and to use wedding as an important opportunity to showcase their daughter's status. And the wealth transfer continued during their marital life, marked by further childbirth, property purchasing. So, so these 82 women receive wealth across various key milestones, life course transitions. And then we're going to look at the source of the transfer. So grandparents, we all know grandparents. So grandparents used to, I will talk a little bit about patriarchal norms still persist, but there's a window opportunity for these only daughters to receive wealth from their grandparents as well. So grandparents, parents, in-laws. So they are recipients of from multiple givers across their life course. So this is just a breakdown, kind of a rough number of the women reported, or types of cash transfer or valuables and properties, and the source they receive. So I want to discuss more in depth specific cases I had. One of the key milestones, Gaokao. So Gaokao and red envelopes. Gaokao is a very important opportunity for only daughters to receive cash, to receive some of the women said 人生第一桶金. Don't know if you understand the 第一桶金. Parents tend to host very lavish banquets called 庆功宴 to celebrate their daughters' 高考 successes. Okay, so this kind of banquets used to be only kind of the honor reserved for boys, but for the only daughter families, they also want to celebrate their children's successes. And it's not just about 庆功宴, it's about it's an opportunity to get cash gifts. I give you two examples. One is 子宁钱 and one is 杨马. So 子宁钱, she's a very interesting case. She at the time of interview, she was age of 35, and she was an engineer, had 2 children. She had a really, really tough upbringing. She's a 矿工的女儿, so she's a daughter of a miner. And from Shanxi, her parents lost their jobs when she was a teenager. So her parents migrated to the south to be migrant workers. So she was one of the left behind children cared by her grandparents. So she had this kind of double disadvantage. Not having parents during teenager years, and it was called 熊孩子 for those terms used to describe left behind children. But she got accepted by a very prestigious university in Beijing. She described it as against all odds, because someone from Shanxi to go to Beijing was an incredible honor. And now we go back to the cash gifts. She was cared for by her grandparents, and she also got 2 male cousins cared by grandparents at the same time. So by patriarchal norm, her male cousins would have entitled to the grandparents' cash gifts. But because she performed so well in Gaokao and went to a prestigious university, and her parents were very proud of her. So her grandparents used this kind of meritocracy as a new norm to reset the patriarchal codes and give half of their savings to Zini. And her cousin only got a very limited amount of the grandparents' saving. So Yang Ma is another case, because these are only daughters, so only kind of, they didn't have brothers, so the only kind of examples they could give their male cousins at the time. Yang Ma is another case. She went to Tsinghua. So Tsinghua in mainland China is one of the most prestigious universities in China. And she was a legend in her hometown. And her father hired the most expensive hotel in the city and had more than 300 guests. And she said at a scale much more extravagant than her own wedding. And she still recalled her father's speech during the 庆功宴, the Gaokao, the banquet, and about how brilliant she is. And one of the words her father used was, "My daughter is surpassing all sons." So even as a girl having such an achievement, so they still uses the male standards to measure her success. And also because her grandparents at the same time, the male cousin was the descendant of the line, the Ma bloodline in their terms, didn't go to university, was accepted in Zhongzhuan. So the grandparents were very upset about the poor performance of the male cousin, therefore gave her 100,000 yuan at the time. And she later used this cash gift as her property deposit. And her grandparents used the word, going to Tsinghua was a Guangzhong Yaozu. So it's not just the moment of going to the most prestigious university in mainland China, it's about the honor her grandparents consume for the rest of their lives. So she was a legend. So her grandparents went to the park to do all the dancing, square dancing, proudly say, oh, my granddaughter went to Tsinghua. How about your grandchildren? So this is a term called relational dignity. This concept proposed by Liu Qian. It was very interesting how the grandparents temporarily reset the patriarchal norm to adjust to this kind of the only daughter's success. But it's only, I must emphasize, it's only in temporary. Only in temporary, because I will follow up about others who couldn't get married, the story of this. So this is one of finding about the cash gift. So the cash gift continues, not just about the Gaokao, cash gifts continue after they get married, after they give birth. So Zini, again, so after she got married, she had 2 children. So she received a much bigger hongbao from her in-laws after she gave birth to a boy. And for continuing the Zhang, her husband was Zhang bloodline. But her second born was a girl, and the girl didn't get any, so she didn't get any reward for producing a girl. So Zini was very reflective about experience. And she said, when I was in my natal family, my gender didn't play a role. You know, as long as I work hard, I go to university, I was treated better than boys. So I believe in merit, individual great. But the society operates another rule, patriarchy. And she was worried about her daughter. She said, what my daughter, you know, what kind of society my daughter will grow up? It'll be more patriarchal. Can she change her destiny by studying hard, by working hard? So she used the phrase, 知识改变命运. So in mainland China, they use, as long as you study hard, and you can have a better life chance. And she didn't believe her daughter will have the same opportunity she had when she had no competition with with brothers. So apart from the cash gifts, and I also found other types of assets, wealth accumulation. So one of the case was a wedding ceremony was very, very important for only daughters. So it's very similar to the Greek big fat weddings. The parents use this opportunity to broadcast their only daughter's status. So many of my interviewees commented that their weddings, their parents want to treat them as if they were boys. Because the traditional patriarchal norms, the groom's family are primarily responsible for hosting weddings and for particularly paying for the weddings. So most of my interviewees, they had 2 weddings, if they are not from the same cities. So they have a wedding in their with their natal family, and they have another wedding. And also wedding is an opportunity for them to receive gifts. Jewelry was one of the jewelry designer, 奢侈品 designer bags, imported cards, or the reported kind of source of their gifts. So I'll just give a case of this, how jewelry as a gift become competitive between wives and husbands. So Wu Xiaoli, 33, she's a lawyer in Shanghai, and she said, she gave a case, she said, my in-laws gave me 3 金, 3 golds. So a gold ring, a gold necklace, and gold bracelet. It's so old-fashioned. My parents were not impressed. So they brought me a diamond and platinum jewelry set. So, so Xiaoli and her husband, they're from a very similar professional background. They hold professional jobs in Shanghai. Their family backgrounds differ. Xiaoli from a professional family in Jiangsu. Parents had professional jobs, but her husband only child, born from Henan, from a less affluent family. One parent is professional, one working class from Henan. So, and her parents were disappointed for her to marry down to a Henan ren. So I don't know if you know the kind of subtle kind of geographical context with Henan. I'm from Anhui. I must declare I'm from Anhui. So I kind of resonate with the discussions about this from Henan. So every time when I say I'm from Anhui, and they will say, oh, Anhui just either migrant workers or beggars. Or so like 2 types of exports from Anhui and Henan. Henan, Anhui topped the migrant workers in China. So for someone from Henan, her parents were not very happy, but they felt like, we only got 1 daughter, you choose your own love, so free will. But they still want to make their point. So by buying a more expensive or more tasteful jewelry as a way to upstage the groom's family. So this is her family practice. And another case was Shu Yi, and she's a Beijing native. She's from Beijing, 36-year-old, and she's from a very, very well-to-do family. Her sandwich gift. So her, before the story was her husband, also from quite wealthy family, had studied abroad in the States. So when they got married, before they got married, the groom family bought an apartment for the couple in a very nice neighborhood, and also bought a Land Rover for Shu Yi. And I was told that this is Luhu is one of the considered to be a very luxurious brand in mainland China. And her parents felt like this kind of gifts is like those from nouveau rich, so 暴发户才会给的. So her grandparents are actually musicians. They perform globally. So they gave her a Steinway gift was a Steinway piano. And I never heard of a Steinway before this interview. So it also opened my and I had to check how much it cost after the interview, because I feel like if I ask the price, I will be the same level as her husband, the family. So she basically said it's not always about the money, it's about, sentimental value, it's about cultural taste. You can't buy taste with money. So this is her, you can see the competition between the natal and marital families. So the daughters no longer splashed water, because in the traditional patriarchal norms, married daughters splash water. But the marriage and the weddings themselves were very important opportunity for the families to showcase their wealth, to do their family projects, and to upstage. So, but what's the purpose of upstaging? Through juries, through starry piano, is to signal their daughter's status, to help their daughter to have a say, to have a footing in their marriage. So after birth, so another case was luxurious gift. It was after birth, so it was very related to kind of patriarchal practice. So Lu Yuxia, 37 at the time of the interview, she was a senior accountant, and she was given a Hermes handbag, designer bag, by her in-laws after the second child. So she was, she didn't want to have another child. She suffered motherhood penalty after giving birth to the first child, who was a girl, and it took her 4 or 5 years to get back to her original kind of career ladder. She didn't want to have another child, and neither did her husband. But her in-laws enlisted her parents and talk about the importance of multiple children, and they used the terms 多子多福, more kids and more fortune. And so, but for her, she was very torn. She had really mixed feelings about this very expensive designer bag, and she felt like, you know, my career, I'm too old to have a spring of my career. So, and she told, many respondents told me, in mainland China, women's career peak at 35. So at the time she said, I finally, after the birth of my first child, I finally back to my career, and I am about to embrace the best time of my career, and yet I hit another wall. She said, it's not possible for me to go back, to be competitive, and to get more contracts. I will be prioritizing my children, to be a mom, to 回归家庭, returning back to the family. So what's the point of having a mass bag? So where am I going to show off this mass bag? So the broad attention was many of them, these kind of material gifts, very valuable for sure, and very important for the wealth accumulation, but it's at the cost of their own freedom. So particularly childbirth-related cash gifts still hinged on women's compliances with traditional patriarchal norms. So the marital family had a more say in terms of wealth, in terms of fertility after marriage. And the last finding about women's wealth was through property. So, so I only look at the married couples and their property ownership. It's not a quantitative study, so it cannot be generalizable. But for the majority of my respondents, they had a joint ownership. So the joint ownership with their husbands. Or married to families. So 15 of them had no ownership of any type of property. So what I found in my respondents, only daughters' parents are very active in accumulating wealth through multiple property ownerships. So we have 9 respondents who are the sole owner of the marital properties. They also co-own properties with their parents. 19 of the women co-own property with their parents, which means I will give you an example. So if they had a marital property in Beijing, they also had properties in Heilongjiang or Jilin in their home provinces with their parents. So why we need to talk about property, probably the same case of Taipei and in Taiwan in general. Property is a very important channel for wealth accumulation in mainland China since 2000. So let's look at the Huijie's case. So Huijie was 35 at the time of the interview, and she was a freelancer. So a very flexible job, and she was also doing part-time postgraduate study. So she was a daughter of two well-off professionals in Heilongjiang, where they owned more than one property. So her parents were really savvy in terms of investment, property investment. So after graduating from university, Huijie was frustrated with rental. So you probably, all the young people had a similar experience. You rent from a landlord and your landlord kicked you out. I moved in London more than 10 times because the landlord suddenly wanted houses back. So she was frustrated about landlord, and her parents said, "Oh, don't worry, let's just buy a property for you." So they bought a two-bed flat in Chaoyang around 2002. But by the time when she got married, the property value increased at least 6 times. So, which means so let's talk about, so that's the property value. Her husband family, also from a professional family, also had wealth, but her husband family didn't invest in properties. So they have very kind of unequal wealth positions at the start of the family. So for Huijie felt this initial wealth position helped her to set the tone in a marriage, in an egalitarian marriage she desired. And she emphasized, I don't want to be superior to my husband, but my superior wealth allow me to have voice in a marriage. I don't have to work full-time. I could do part-time study, and my in-laws cannot come and go in my flat. So she said wealth is so important for women to have a position in a family, particularly in terms of property ownership. So another, by contrast, I want to show another case, Peng Zhenqing. She's also a very, very interesting case. I started her story at the beginning of my book. She's such a fascinating character, and she was one of the, like many, the only daughter's family, had incredible start in education. She went to Renda, was one of the leading universities in China, family pride. She also studied in a very prestigious university in the UK. And during the job fair in London, she got an offer in an international hedge fund company in Beijing. Her husband didn't get any job offer in London. So they moved back to London, and she had a really, really good salary. She was one of the best underwriter for that company. She had annual bonus. She had a lot of income, significantly more than her husband. But the problem in Beijing is very expensive. So her husband family helped them to founded their a flat, 3-bed apartment. It's a gated community, considered a bit kind of more luxurious in the near Beijing's Olympic Village. And because of this property investment, because of this wealth position in property ownership, Peng Zhen's family didn't contribute to her marital residence. So she felt, you know, despite the fact I earned a lot, I earned significantly more than her husband, she was constantly monitored by her in-laws. So her in-laws stay with her. So at the beginning, her in-law moved in after the birth of the first child as a, grandparents care. It's very standard kind of family practice in China. And of course, her career suffered after the birth of the first child. And she, at the same time, and she talked about her husband outsourced all the fatherly duties to her parents. So her husband could concentrate on his study, and her husband instead had an opportunity to pursue a further study in a very famous business school in the States. So she was left in Beijing with her in-laws, and her in-laws said, "You need to have another child." So, we go to the house for you. All you need to do is have another child. And so she was she said that she was gaslit into having another child, and she could no longer keep up with a very competitive career. So she moved to a public sector, SOE, a very easy job in the human resource department in an SOE. And I was told SOE, human resource department, parked many women who previously worked in a very competitive sectors, then transition to this relatively easy jobs where they could combine family. So she was very angry about her in-laws, and she talked about her in-laws as a patriarchal gang. She talked about them as gaslighters, but essentially she said, so her career and her husband's career completely opposite direction. So she said that the main reason for this very contrasting career trajectories, my parents didn't have that contribution to the property ownership. So we can see very different marriage relationships, and sadly still hinged on property ownership. So I wanted to say, I don't know how long I've been. Okay. So I want to just kind of summarize about this particular finding on only daughters and wealth accumulation. So I would like to argue that only daughters a significant recipient of wealth from multiple givers, from their parents, grandparents, like previous research, and also their in-laws across lifetime stage. They are so heiress. They had a lot of opportunities to receive cash, to receive gifts. But unlike the relatively uncontested this kind of wealth transfer in the natal family, the wealth accumulation after marriage still hinged on the extent to which they comply with patriarchal norms, particularly giving birth, having children, giving birth to boys. So I think it's important for us to kind of bring more kind of life course lens in our research about marriage, about family relations, and about gender relations. The families are really dynamic kind of unfolding sites which expose both consistent and also competing different cultural values, and also exposing very dynamic power relations. I also want to look at, so when we look at gender wealth accumulation, we also need to assess the wealth positions evolving. The wealth position also relational. We really need to use a holistic lens to assess how their wealth position accumulated and even diluted across life course transitions. I think that's all for today. Yeah, so if you have any question, I look forward to your question and discussion. Thank you.